Welcome students. This class I will be sharing the points related with the people who took part in this movement, especially in the town, why the town people joined this movement, what was the reason for joining this movement. In the countryside, many farmers joined this movement, and what were the demands and reasons for joining this movement and how they took the movement later. So let's begin. In the countryside, the rich peasant communities like the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh were active in the movement. Being producers of commercial crops, they were very hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As their cash crop disappeared, they found it impossible to pay the government's revenue demands. For them, the fight for Swaraj was struggle against high revenues. And the refusal of the government to reduce the revenue demand led to widespread resentment movement. This rich peasant became enthusiastic supporters of the civil disobedience movement, organizing their communities and at times forcing reluctant members, those who are not willing to take part in the movement. So they called them also to participate in boycott programs. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rate being revised. So when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of the farmers refused to participate. Remember this, students. The poorer peasantry, how they took this movement and why they joined this movement. What was their reason for joining this movement? So many of them were small tenants cultivating land they had rented from landlords. As the depression continued and cash income dwindled, that means became less, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. So they were not just interested in lowering of the revenue demand. They also wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. That means to be excluded. They don't want to pay the rent. So they joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists. Apprehensive of this raging issue that might upset the rich peasants and the landlords, the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaign in most places. They were not supporting the no rent campaign because this could hurt the relationship between the rich peasant and the Congress. So the relation between the poor peasants and Congress remained uncertain. The reason is Congress did not support a no rent campaign. Now, how the business classes saw this movement? What were the reasons they joined the movement? What were their demands? During the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profit and become powerful. So keen on expanding their business, they now reacted against colonial policies because the colonial policies restricted this Indian business activities. They wanted protection against import of foreign goods. That means the goods that are produced in Britain, they want it to be stopped so that the Indian business class can do the business by selling the Indian goods. To organize business interest, this business class formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in the year 1920. So they also gave financial assistance for the movement and refused to buy or sell imported goods. This business class gave financial assistance to the movement. Most businessmen came to see Swaraj as the time when colonial restriction on business would no longer exist. That means they want the business to be controlled by the Indian people, not by the foreigners. And this would enlarge their business, would flourish without any obstruction. So, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industries, FICCI, was founded in 1927, and this FICCI is still in existence in India. Led by prominent industries like Purushottam Das, Thakur Das, and G.D. Birla, the industrialists attacked colonial control over Indian economy, not physically, virtually. They attacked the British business class, business economy, and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched. But after the failure of the Round Table Conference, business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic. All the business class were not active with the disobedience movement because spread of militant activities and prolonged disturbance of business as well as of growing influence of socialism among the younger members of the Congress discouraged these business classes. Militant activities, too much of hartals, and the influence of socialism, that is a bit tilting toward communism. So the business class were not too much encouraged by this movement. The industrial working class, how they took this movement, the people who work in the industry, not the owner, industrialist, but industrial working class. They did not participate in civil disobedience movement in large number, remember this, except in Nagpur region of Maharashtra. As the industrial came closer to Congress, industrialists, remember, industrial working class and industrialists are different. Industrialists are owner of the industry and industrial working class, those who work in that industry. So the industrialists, when they joined the non-civil disobedience movement, this industrial working class were not encouraged. They remained aloof. But in spite of that, some workers did participate in civil disobedience movement, selectively adopting some of the ideas of Gandhian program like boycott of foreign goods as a part of their movement against low wages and poor working conditions. Now, there might be questions, why did the industrial working class stay aloof when industrialists joined the movement? Because you see, industrialists are the owner of industry, remember. So they joined this movement because they had certain demands which might impact the working class also. So that's why the industrial working class stayed aloof. But some of the industrial working class took part, taking some of the programs like boycotting foreign goods, low wages and poor working conditions. Because of this, the industrial working class joined the movement. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930, dock workers, that means shipyard in ship. In 1930, thousands of workers in Chotanagar tin mines, that means iron mines, wore Gandhi caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But the Congress was reluctant to include workers' demand as a part of its program of struggle. They were reluctant. The Congress were not supporting all the demand. That's why they were reluctant, this working class joining this movement, because they felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide anti-imperial forces. Now, women's role in this civil disobedience movement. What was the role of women in civil disobedience movement? Civil disobedience movement was the large scale participation of women. During Gandhi's salt march, thousands of women came out of their home to listen to Gandhi. They participated in protest march, manufactured salt and picketed foreign cloth, liquor shops, and many went to jail. In urban areas, especially in urban areas, who joined this? Women from high caste families. And in rural areas, the rich peasant household joined this movement, not the general woman. Moved by Gandhi's call, they began to see service to the nation as a sacred duty of women. This is the duty of women, so we also need to join the movement. Yet, this increased public role did not necessarily mean a radical change, a big change in the way the position of woman was visualized. The way the women want to be a part of the society, this movement did not brought that type of changes. Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home and hearth, be good mothers and good wives, according to the Gandhi. So women should be restricted in kitchen and homes. And for a long time, the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. So women joining this movement was just for symbolic presence.